What is going on, YouTube people? Today, I want to have we're a little story time, have a little discussion. I had or I should say, I heard the one of the wildest statements I've heard from a dealer in a long time at any type of show. Cards, comics, doesn't make a difference. And I don't mean that in necessarily a negative way. He was brutally honest with me. Which, hey, I appreciate. Props to the dealer. But what I really want to kind of talk about is the thought process behind the statement. And this is something we've discussed before on the channel, and that is sometimes you just got to eat the loss. And I think not taking losses is the number one mistake that people make in collectibles. The fear of taking that loss. So, what did this dealer say to me? At the most recent Heroes Con show, a little over a week ago now, at time of recording. As many of you know, whether you care about cards or comics or whatever this applies to anything. But as many as you know, I was hunting for an X-Men 1. Low grade, 3.5. That was probably a reach. Most likely a 1.5 to a 2.5. But anything 3.5 or under that I saw on the show floor, I put hands on. So I wanted to see how it looked in hand, see the price, etc. And prices were, for the most part, I'd say about 30% in the realm of negotiating and 70% just like we're so far off. And there was varying degrees of that. So I walk up to this one booth. It's middle of the day on Friday, and I see an X-Men 2.5 sitting on his wall, and I could not see the price. A lot of dealers put it on the back of the books. So I said, hey, can I look at that 2.5? I'm looking for one in that grade range. He goes up, pulls it off, and before he even hands it to me, he's like walking the book over to me. He goes, don't buy this for me. He's like, I would not buy this for me. He's like, walk around the rest of the show floor and find something somewhere else. He's like, you can look at it, but I'm just telling you, I wouldn't buy this from me. And I was like, oh. And he didn't tell me the price. He hands me the book, and he's like, I just can't even get close to current market day price of where it's at. And I said, oh, okay. I said, no problem. Thanks for being honest. I'll still take a look at it, just in case. So he hands it to me, and he goes and talks to another customer while I'm looking at it real quick. And I flip it over. And the price on the back, I believe, was 10.5K. Now, I have GPA pulled up. That's basically the comic book version of Market Movers. Currently, the 90-day average on a 2.5 X-Men, and this will vary a little bit depending on how it presents, is $5,200. Here are all the sales so far this year. Basically about, on average, one a month. A couple sold in January, and then it spread out a little bit from there. But we have a 4.4, a 4.8, a 4.9, a 5.7, a 5.5, a 5.2, and a 5 even. So it's actually been trending up a little bit this year. So basically a 5K, probably closer to 6K-ish book. Given how the con pricing was going, stickered at between, let's just call it between 6 and 7K, just based off of what I was seeing at other prices. A fair price would have been probably sticker at 5K and work down from there a little bit. But regardless, 10.5K. For reference, the last time this book sold in that price range was 2021. Late summer, end of year, heading in the fall, 2021 into early 2022. You can see here's March 31st, 2022. Average selling price, $11,000. And then from there, that is when the wheels fell off the comic book market. Spring of 2022. A little bit later than the sports card world. And you can see it's been a straight decline from there, and it rapidly went down. It was averaging 11,000, then 9,000, then 8.5, 8.4, 7.8, 6s and 7s, down to the mid to low 6s, and then down into the 5s to where it's at now. really anywhere between, around 5 to 6K, probably about 5.5K if you wanted to average. Well, we have it right there. The 90-day average is 5.3. So let's just call it 5.5K. So this dealer was double the current market prices because I'm assuming he was probably into it for peak pandemic pricing at 10K. Now, I don't know his business, but just generally speaking, and his comment was, I have to wait for this to go back up. That's the trap, in my opinion. Now, we are talking about an X-Men 1 here. From a sports card perspective, this would be like one of the top tier desirable vintage cards. Think, a Maze in a 2.5, a Jim Brown in a 2.5, a Hank Aaron in a 2.5. It's not on the Mickey Mantle level of things. That would be an AF-15. But this is right up there for Marvel, top tier Silver Age books. I mean, this is right there. This is a monster. So, you got to have that little bit of context here that we're not talking about like a Victor Wembanyama Silver Prism or like an X-Men 266 or something like that transacts all the time. But still, the chances of this getting back to 10K anytime soon is slim to next to none. Could it go back up? Yes, we've already seen a little bit of an increase since the beginning of the year, since the end of the year. Realistically, let's pretend the X-Men come to the MCU and they just crush. I mean, just knock it out of the park. Best case, I think this gets back up to maybe 6K, 7K. Gets a little bit of a bump up, 10, 15, maybe 20% bump up in prices. It's not going back to 10.5. It's just not. Now, could it get there eventually? Sure. If you have an ultra long time horizon, it will probably continue to creep back up over time, just like it used to. You can see here over, decades, over years, slowly creeping up. And then obviously the pandemic happened. Everything went crazy. But to me, that is the trap. The trap is the hopes, wishes, and prayers that it's just going to magically go back up. And then you need it to go all the way back up just to break even on the thing. Now, what's the opposite approach to this? Sell it at the current market value. And the question is, why? Now, and this is where it comes down to a little bit on individual finances. This guy's I assume, a full-time comic book dealer, or a very, if it's a side hustle, it's a very major side hustle because he's setting up at a major event and he had a lot of inventory. What is more likely to happen? Him just sitting on the book, and once again, replace this with whatever card you want to. If you have something in your own personal collection that you've been like, man, I would just rather move off this. I just don't want to deal with this, whatever, but I'm too underwater on it. Would he be better off let's just call it 5.5K. 5.5K sit tied up in that book on the hopes, wishes, and prayers that it's going to go back up to 10K. Is that the more likely scenario? Or would he have been better off to sell it to someone? It doesn't have to be me. Cut a deal to show for 5.5K cash and then put that 5.5K to work. He could take that money and go buy a $5,000 collection. Something pops up on Facebook, Craigslist, whatever. Someone's walking the show floor, has a monster collection. He could buy a huge collection for 5K. Get the dealer discount. You're getting the discount because you're buying the mass collection and taking the scrap with the good stuff. Piece that out. Start, grading stuff, sell the big keys, put them on your wall, have all this fresh inventory for your shows. To me, that seems like the much better path. these hopes and dreams that these things are going to magically return back to the prices that they were peak pandemic just aren't going to happen. There's not, hopefully, God willing, there's not another pandemic happening. And we get caught in this, I don't want to take a loss. People don't want to see red on the ledger. And here's the thing. I guarantee, because he probably bought this book here in the 2021s, 22s, probably towards the end of the run. I'm assuming he's into it for around 10K because that's what he has it stickered for. And he doesn't want to take a loss on it. Maybe he's got a little wiggle room on that. But he had other opportunities to exit out of that while it was on the way down. He probably could have sold it when it dropped down to 8K. He probably could have sold it when it dropped down to 7K. He probably could have sold it when it dropped down to 6K. Now it flirted with 4.5. Luckily, it bounced back up to 5.5. If I saw that hit 4.5 for a hot minute, and now it bounced back up, probably off the backs of X-Men 97 and the MCU hype and Deadpool and Wolverine starting to build a little bit, I don't know. To me, that seems like a good point to try to get out of it. Get that 5.5K in cash and take that, turn it around, and you would probably make more profit off of that than just sitting and hoping that an X-Men 1 goes back up. Now, like I said, in this specific example, an X-Men 1 is a little different because it is a Grail vintage piece, but still, as a dealer especially, your whole thing is to free up capital to buy the next thing, turn that around, and rinse and repeat. But even just in ourselves, I'm not a dealer. I've taken losses on cards, and it's been some of the best decisions that I've ever made. I have a famous video on the channel where I bought a Deshaun Watson Silver Prism on Star Stock, and literally the next day, it comes out with the allegations of the massage parlor stuff with all the massage therapists. I bought it on one day. The next day, that news came out, and the prices started to tank. And I had to make a split-second decision. Am I going to ride this thing? Or do I sell it right now and just take the immediate, whatever it was, 30, 40%. I think it dropped like 30% overnight. Do I just fire sale this thing right now, or do I wait and let this thing play itself out? And I sat down and looked, and I said, okay, if I wait this out, I'm going to have to wait an entire year for this to play itself out. And then I have to hope that he comes back and is actually good again, and that people actually want to buy his cards. And what's going to happen between now and that point in time? How cheap is this thing going to get? Now, a little bit of a different situation there. Obviously, that's sports. There's off-the-field stuff going on, but it doesn't really matter what the reason is. Someone gets hurt, a movie tanks, whatever. I decided to exit out of that card. I sold it the next day. Took like a 40% loss on it. But I took that money and I bought 2 more cards and ended up flipping those 2 cards for a tremendous profit and ended up with more money than when I had the Watson, than what I paid for the Watson. I forget the exact numbers. I bought the Watson for like $1,200. I sold it for like $700, and I'm playing real loose with the numbers here because this was years ago now. Bought 2 cards. I believe it was 2 Acuna first Bowmans. Those shot way up because he started the season hot. I got a little lucky there, and then sold those both for profit. I think I bought 3 of them actually. This whole afraid to take red in the ledger, you got to get over it, folks. You got to sit down, whatever it is that you got, whether it's a card, a comic, a non-sports card, Pokemon, TCG, whatever. Lay out the path. What is the timeline? What needs to happen? Assume everything goes perfect. What's your time horizon until that item gets back to the price that you need it to get to just to break even? And then sit down and look at the most likely scenario, which is probably somewhere in the middle. And then look at the scenario where it all goes to crap. And then look at what you could sell it for today and what you could do with that money. Now, if you have unlimited money, you don't care. You can let it ride. And maybe that was this person's deal. Maybe he has tons of money and he's completely free to go buy whatever it is that he needs to buy. If that's the case and you're willing to live with it and wait for it, do your thing. That would be the one asterisk to this, I guess, is if you just have unlimited funds available to you to go do whatever it is you need to do. But if something comes up and you're like, man, that is a sweet deal. Someone walks up to that guy with an amazing collection, just a sick long box full of key books, minor keys, classic covers, whatever. Maybe they're all raw. There's huge potential there to grade. And they're like, I want $6K for this. I'd like $6K for this box. And he runs the numbers and it is a steal of a deal. And he looks around and he goes, I only got 2. I don't have it in the budget right now for this. What has more potential to get you your money back? Sitting on that dead sunk cost, or accepting the loss, putting the money back in your hands, and putting the money back out there in the world? For me, I've had greater success with that than sitting waiting on hopes and dreams for something to go back up. Half the time, actually probably more than half the time, when I've done that, because I have done that, I've absolutely been like, I'm not taking a loss on this. No siree. Usually what ends up happening is 6 months later, I'm pissed because it went even lower. And I would have been better off selling earlier. Another famous one is the Select Luca Premier. Bought that card for $1,500. I think it was like $1,500. Maybe it was $1,200. Once again, this was like 3 years ago. Way overpaid for it. It was peak pandemic. Prices started to crash. It got down to like $400, I think it was. I don't remember. There's a video somewhere on the channel. I said, screw it. I'm selling. I'm done. And that was one where I missed multiple opportunities to exit out from that card. And I just refused because I was too idiotic to just sell it and take the initial hit. So instead, I took a bigger hit. And I remember a lot of people in the comments were like, you should have never sold that card. You should have waited. It's going to go back up. Yada, yada, yada. Lo and behold, I think that card never went back up again at all. And I think it ended up, I don't even know what that card is right now. Maybe $100, $150, $75. It's not that expensive. It kept going down aggressively even after I sold it. I'd have been way better off to just cut ties on that way sooner. Now, are you going to get burned every once in a while? As in most things in life? Sure. You got to do your homework, do your research. Every once in a while, one of these things is going to blow up back in your face. You're going to sell, and maybe something crazy happens and it actually does go to the moon. But how many times is that going to happen versus how many times it's not going to happen? Play the odds. Curious for your thoughts and comments, as always, down below. That's all I got for you, boys and girls. Don't be afraid to take losses. I'm not saying you got to fire sale your entire inventory. Be selective, look things over, see what makes sense. But just sitting and holding on to this stuff, I think it's the biggest mistake people make. Peace.